So I'm not going to be up here any longer because we have Mike up here and he's going to share a lot of advice about exam tips and tricks. So I'm particularly interested in this session. So thank you so much and give him a warm welcome.
Welcome and happy Wednesday. Can you all hear me in the back? Excellent. So my name is Mike Corkery. I am a Microsoft certified trainer, a former MVP. I was awarded 2012 to 2015 in Office Developer Suite. I'm also a consultant. I currently work mostly with small business, local government. A lot of it is getting them into the 90s. And I have a small subset that usually gets, I only have 3 jokes. They don't get any better than that one. But a lot of them are bringing them into the 90s, but there's a small subset now that are actually starting to talk about Azure and cloud services. So I'm helping them navigate how do they get from these antiquated systems that are living in a server room, and a lot of them are running XP or Server 2000, really old stuff, into the cloud so things are maintainable. And for me as a consultant, if it's in the cloud, I can manage it much more easily than spending 2 hours driving to each of these locations. I am also a self-proclaimed certification addict. I have, at this point, passed close to 100 Microsoft exams in the last 15 years. It's a sickness. If you do the math in terms of money and time, it's a sickness. But if that's the worst of it, my wife doesn't have a whole lot to worry about. That was joke number 2. Part of my consulting work, I actually work as a lead content development manager for one of the companies that builds certification exams for Microsoft and others. So I am not going to share anything that's going to get me fired or in trouble, but I can share some insights into how exams are put together, what to expect, especially from these Azure exams, and strategies for exams. So I have learned a lot about what works and what doesn't work over the years. I'm going to share it with you. I want to make this as conversational as possible so that you get as much out of this as possible. In terms of certifications, there's a whole pile. Microsoft has instituted this new thing called badging. Badging is very popular with the younger crowds. For me, it's more stuff. There are multiple badges, certifications, and individual exams that you can earn. Microsoft actually just went to the extreme measure of backfilling all of the live exams. So I ended up with an inbox full of emails from the company that manages this for Microsoft. How many of you have taken a Microsoft exam ever? Keep your hands up for me. How many in the last 2 years or so? So for the rest of you, consider it that you really have not taken a Microsoft exam. They are significantly different than they used to be. There's a lot more going on, a lot more ways that we can ask questions. So I'm going to share some of that with you. Start by talking about the certification paths. So Microsoft implemented certification changes in the past couple of years, and then they changed them, and they're refining them to make things easier. There's something called a Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate. It requires 2 exams. Out of this group of 5, you pick. Most of you are probably familiar with the 532, 533, and hopefully the 534 that we're here to talk about today. There are 2 others. So designing and implementing cloud data platform solutions, think SQL, SQL Azure, database, data-driven solutions, and then big data analytics. HG Insight, Data Lake jobs, big things of that nature. Both of those exams are relatively new. I think they were introduced early last year. And the Azure solutions have shown up for a while. We've also got the follow-on certification. So this is the Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert, Cloud Platform and Infrastructure. The prerequisite is that you need that MCSA, the foundational exam set. After that, you take one more exam, call it an elective, so any one of those will work. So if you took 532 and 533, 534 brings you up to being a certified solutions expert. 246 and 247 are related to data private clouds. 413 and 414 are part of the Windows Server stack of exams. And there's one more in there. 744. Just Server 2016, thank you. So any of those will work. You'll find that all of the new certification paths, there are typically just a couple of exams to get an MCSA level, and then one exam to get you to the next level, the Certified Solutions Expert, or if you're in the dev world, Certified Solutions Developer. All of these certifications start multiplying because these electives also work for some other exams. The reason you saw so many of those badges there for me is because you take a bunch of exams, they all fill in each other. Any questions about certs in general? Okay, so the question is there another level after Certified Solutions Expert? The answer is there is no longer. So there are really multiple levels of the pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, there's something called Microsoft Technology Associate. Think of that as an on-ramp for college students, career changers, the person that was in the business world that wants to switch over to IT. Those are all foundational, fundamental topics. Solutions Associate layers on top of that, and then Solutions Expert or Solution Developer is at the top of the pyramid. There used to be a program called a Master's Program, and that was available for specific technologies such as SQL and Exchange. That program was disbanded, I think, 3 or 4 years ago now. Other questions? I generally like to bring this up, and I'll actually bring this page up again. If you go to Microsoft.com/learning, top right of the page, put in the exam number. It's going to bring you to the exam information page. That is your single point of truth for an exam. What's in scope, what's not in scope, who the target audience is for the exam. There are also links to resources to help you prepare for the exam and various other things related to that exam. It's very important for you as candidates for Azure exams to visit this page. As an instructor, when I teach an Azure course, I generally will prep the weekend before. I will expect during the week when I'm teaching that course, something will be broken because Microsoft has made a change. The pace of change is so great that nobody can keep up with it. When Microsoft decides to make significant changes to the list of skills measured on an exam, it will actually be reflected on the page for the exam. Certain changes do not get reflected. How many of you are aware that DocumentDB has been rebranded to Cosmos DB? In terms of what's there, a lot of it really was so far just rebranding. There will come a divergence where Cosmos DB adds a lot of other functionality. And sooner or later, what was DocumentDB will be considered deprecated. Right now, it's just a branding change. When things like that happen, and that was just announced in mid-May at the Build conference, the skills measured will get updated. That document will get updated to reflect the change in branding. The exam items will actually get updated to reflect the branding. And that change is actually already in the works. So if you took the exam over the summer, you may see Cosmos DB. We have SMEs validate that the items still work, even with the change in branding. If they don't, they get pulled. Azure is very frequently updated, so courseware, exams are also now very frequently updated. On a typical exam, how often would you expect updates? For those of you that have taken, let me ask it a different way. For those of you that have taken an exam in the past, how many of you have seen content that clearly out of date? And several people held up their hands, and that is sort of a fact of life. You have so much content, you try to keep it updated. Azure and Office 365 are two of the technologies that are on a fast track at Microsoft. Those are updated very frequently. I don't want to actually give you a number, but they are updated very frequently, so that if there's branding changes or if there are deprecated technologies, we know about it pretty quickly. We deal with it to pull the old content out and create new content to put in its place. So exams are refreshed very frequently. If there are significant changes to the technology, Microsoft will give you fair warning before those changes show up in the certification exam. I'm going to give you an example. In the quotes, that actually comes directly from the 534 certification page. Last November, there was a huge effort to realign the list of skills measured for all of the Azure exams to changes in the technology. They also removed things that were not really good measures of if you were a good candidate for a hiring manager. All of the questions and all of the item pools for Azure were looked at to make sure that they were still valid, given that new set of skills measured. Because of the scope of the change, there's so many changes and so much content that was removed, that notice went up. That notice still appears today. If you are planning to take the Azure 534, or really any of the Azure exams over the summer, be aware that what you're studying for today may change. Does anybody know when Microsoft's fiscal year starts? July 1. What does that mean for most companies? More money. There's money in the budget. You could probably see over the course of the summer, content will get updated, skills measured will get updated, new content will start showing up. You'll see another announcement like this at some point in time. All of the Azure exams are being and Office 365, these are being very closely watched by Microsoft to make sure that they stay current, because this is the future of the business. This is a big part of Microsoft's business. They want to make sure the content is accurate. If we're saying somebody has the correct skills and a hiring manager interviews you and you've got the certification, you should be able to step in and do a good percentage of the job. Third bullet point I didn't talk about yet, but I'm going to mention it. There has been a recent change. So it used to be once you passed an exam, that was it. It's on your transcript. You have it. It's on your transcript forever until it falls off. Starting roughly, I think it was November, but it wasn't all that public, you can now re-earn several exams and several certifications once per year. Why is that important? Who has taken one of the 3 Azure exams? How long ago did you take it, sir? 1.5 years. So if I had to put a number on it, I would say that half of the questions that you saw no longer exist. They've been replaced with newer technologies. I took my first Azure exam in 2014 when they were first released, or thereabouts. I would say 20 or 30% of those questions are still here. The rest of them are no longer valid. Because of that, if mine said earned 2014, and I was walking in, you're going to interview me, you may consider me, well, at the pace of change, Mike's not really qualified, or Mike may not be qualified. If I'm showing you that I earned in 2017, re-earned in 2017, I am more likely to be qualified than if I had the 2014. In terms of these badges, you can actually either present badges that are clickable links that have verifiable information that when you pass it, how you passed it, or you can share your transcript. But just be aware of that's another change to the program. So right now I believe it's Azure, Office 365. There are a couple of other exams that have the same system in place. Talk about question types. How many of you have taken an exam and it's been almost exclusively multiple choice? Did you like it? I'm seeing a lot of shrugs for those people in the virtual audience. For me, all multiple choice is boring. As an exam author, there are a lot of questions I can't ask as a multiple choice. There are a lot of things that if I could put a screenshot or an event log chart and ask you to interpret what's happening, it's a better way to find out if you understand the technology. You'll find that we do use multiple choice. 1, 2, or 3 correct answers. We will always, nowadays, tell you how many answer choices you're supposed to be finding. We don't leave it to choose all that apply. There's no ambiguity. We tell you what you need. We have something called a dynamic option multiple choice, and I'm going to show you an example. That's a fairly new addition to our toolkit of item types or question types that we can ask. I'm going to come back to that momentarily because I put the slide in the wrong order. We also have case studies. In this room, so we've got about 25 people. How many of you are consultants versus full-time people? So I'm seeing 5 or 6. I'm going to give you a scenario. You walk into a brand new client. You have the introductory meeting. You spend a half hour or so. You get some answers, but you probably have more questions than answers. Think of a case study document as the results, the notes that you took from that first meeting. You know, the stakeholders saying, we don't have tons of money, we want to use as much of our old infrastructure as possible. Here are our constraints. Here is the wish list. If we had all the time and money in the world, this is what we want. All of that is what you consider a case study. In the exam world, we create a case study document, so it's got relevant sections, background information, business and or technical requirements. There may be code or PowerShell or other artifacts. And then we're going to ask you a set of questions that should require you to go back to the case study, find some facts, get some answers from the case study. So what are the assumptions? A case study is treated as a test within a test. What I mean by that is that once you finish that little group of questions and tell the system you're done, you cannot go back to it. So if you've got 7 or 8 questions, you can work with those as long as you like. Once you're done, you're done. A recent change is that they used to do separate timing for case studies and related items. Now they just give you one big bucket of time for the entire exam. Use it as you see fit. So the question was related to, really, where does case study appear in the exam? I will tell you that each case study will have 1 or more questions. You may see 1 or more case studies in the exam. There will be an introductory page when you first start the exam, and those are those pages that none of us really look at. We just kind of click next. It will generally tell you there will be X number of case studies and X number of individual items. In terms of how it organizes, will you get a case study first or individual items? There's no rhyme or reason I can tell. I think it's randomized. I'm not sure of that. But the introductory page will tell you that there's a case study coming up, or you have 2 case studies in this exam and X number of other questions. You'll know how many total questions you need to answer before you start. Yes, sir? So it's sort of another, do I have to start it when it shows up? Yes, you do. Unfortunately, when a case study appears, it says, I'm giving this to you first. You have to go through the case study, all the items, the questions associated with the case study, be done with that, and move on to the next part. Yeah, so gentleman was saying that he got some regular questions, individual items first, and then a couple of case studies, and the more individual items. I've seen all sorts of variation. Seen too many exams and too many differences. You cannot count on that. Yes, so the question is related to UI presentation of the case study. So every case study item has a set of tabs on the left. So it'll say question, background, business requirement, whatever the headers are. You can always go back and forth between the current item and the case study document itself. You're free to go back and forth. Why do we do these? Real world situations. Most of our exam authors that are building case studies for us are actually pulling directly from situations they've encountered. So it's an attempt to give you a real world situation. You cannot always do that in the exam world. Some people will say, well, you wouldn't do this, or it's very contrived, and sometimes you have to do that to test a concept. So there's an art and a science to actually creating these questions. We may need to, because we're told you must specifically test X, we may need to create a question in such a way so that we can actually test that. My strategy, I typically will, when I get into the case study, it'll tell me how many questions. I'm going to look at all of the questions to get a flavor for what's important to them in this set of questions. Then I go back and read the case study and go back and forth as necessary. Here's your standard multiple choice question. So I'm the key stakeholder. You need to ensure that I buy into your design. What are you going to bring to the meeting? All of these answer choices might be compelling, but then again, they might not be. I typically use a process of elimination. What doesn't make sense at all? Money doesn't really work for me. I'm not easily bought off. Penny candy? My wife knows I will never cheat on her, but if I happen to be traveling, if I knew there's one in the area, if anybody wants to tell me about a penny candy store in Times Square, I tend to get a little carried away and buy all sorts of junk food that I don't need. But it just brings me back to when I was a kid. So that's actually the correct answer. I'm going to show you another way of asking the same question. We're going to decompose this into 4 individual questions. Notice that the top part is the same. We call that the item stem. I changed the goal statement to, or the solution, proposed solutions you bring, Penny Candy, to the meeting with me. Does the solution meet the goal? You know now that it does, so you would answer yes to this. From an exam author standpoint, the beauty of this is that you don't have those other choices to help decide if this is correct or not. It's really, you're looking at one question, does this work? You'll see all 4 questions in succession, or maybe you'll only see 3 or 2 or 1. This particular question type, be aware, once you look at the first one, it doesn't even let you go back to the first one. 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order, or whatever, however many you get in that set, up to 4, you cannot go backwards. You will not be able to review the item at the end of the exam. Other question types. We call it build this. We're going to tell you take X number of answer choices from the left side, put them on the right side, put them in order. There are a lot of things that no longer matter in Azure. You can do this first and then do that. There are some things that are very specific. You must do things in a set order. And the order is important, and it's a foundational, fundamental knowledge, useful for testing that. Drag and drop questions. So you'll see a bunch of things on the left. Often you're going to drag them to a table on the right. You know, which authentication mechanism should you use for each application? You kind of give some details about applications. Drag the right ones, correct ones to the correct spots. You may use the same answer choice in more than one place. There's something called a code analysis question. So we may give you some PowerShell or an ARM template, or in the case of the 532, 533s, excuse me, 532, there may be some code. Can you look at that and tell me, does it meet some specific function, or does it do what it's intended? Could be PowerShell scripts. We have something called an active screen. And it used to be, if you've ever taken a developer exam, multiple choice with 10 lines of code, and 10 lines of code, each answer choice is 10 lines of code. There's only 2 really minor differences between each of the answer choices. First thing you had to do is play Where's Waldo? What's different about these answer choices? Then you could figure out which one's correct or incorrect. Most of those are gone. If it's more than 5 lines of something, we use this thing called an active screen. One block of code in the answer area with drop-down lists that let you pick what fits in there to meet the goal. There are some set-based questions. Just so you're aware of, those DOMC, dynamic option multiple choice, where does this meet the goal, and you see one of the 4, those are sets. Case studies are considered sets. So they may be considered tests within tests, or just sections of the tests that you cannot go back after that point. They may share elements. They may have the same scenario and the same goal statement, and just maybe the answer choices that are different. Or the answer choices in the set may be all the same. We're just giving you a different goal. The ability for you to go back to a specific item in the set or to a set is restricted. Let's talk about getting ready to take the exam. Practice. Use labs. There are a lot of labs you've been given here. I've got some links in the slide deck. The slide deck, as of last night, because I just got it to Dan last night, it's probably not on GitHub, but it'll be on GitHub. Read up on what's new. Do not use brain dump sites. There are sites out there that will tell you that they can help you pass the exam, and you pay them some amount of money. Some of those are directly plagiarized. I can tell you that Microsoft is phenomenal with the statistics that they do on items. They can see the patterns. They know when you're cheating. If you want to get decertified and blacklisted, that's how you go about doing it. Some strategies. Read the entire question. For anti-piracy measures, we have this technique whereby we can create 2 versions of a question. Sometimes we can change 1 word or literally 1 digit, change the answer. So instead of A being correct, it's B. You need to be really careful. Read the boilerplate. Often it appears in the bold at the top. It tells you you cannot go back to each item after you get to it or whatever else. Read the instruction statement. If it says which 2 answers will meet the goal, each correct answer presents a complete solution or a part of the solution. We don't put those in there because we want to. It's for your own benefit. Right before you're getting ready to take the exam, you make your appointment. Go out to the Microsoft Learning page, find the exam, look for one of those announcements that's telling you something's changing. Leave comments about the exam questions. The product group didn't tell the exam groups that Azure Remote App was deprecated. Our SMEs found out about it on our own, based on work, but we also found out about it from your comments. Every comment that you add in the live exam actually gets read, and you're looking at one of the people that reads them. I have an algorithm that goes through. I look for certain texts, I look for certain information to find out, do I have a problem with a question? We do this every month. So we read it all. Some additional resources that I want to mention. So the Microsoft Learning homepage, there's also the Microsoft Born to Learn site. Born to Learn is Microsoft Learning's, the Learning Group's social site. If you want to learn about new exams, new promotions, that's where you go. If you want to ask questions about exams, you can go there also. They have a link near the top that says study groups. There is an Azure study group there also. TechNet Learning Resources has links to learning materials, videos, virtual labs, over and above what you already have linked. Microsoft Virtual Academy has video recorded content. There's a lot of stuff, good stuff, and updated stuff on Azure. edX.org. So edX is an open platform, massively online something course platform. Microsoft is a partner with edX and has 100 and something courses, including 35 Azure courses. One of the Azure courses happens to be Architecting Azure Solutions. It was updated in April. So it's all relatively current content. In terms of practice tests, Microsoft has partnered exclusively with Pearson. So Pearson is the host for exams. You go to a Pearson center to take an exam. Measure Up is a division of Pearson, so they offer practice exams for all the Microsoft products. Questions? Questions, do we have simulations on the exam? So in terms of actual virtual machine environments, there was a pilot that was done last year for a Windows management exam. So the pilot was very successful. You had some standard questions. You had some actual work in VMs. So there are 2 VMs that you worked in. So that is out there. The proof of concept worked. In terms of other simulations, the Office exams, it's all, actually, you're in a live environment. The rest of it, for most of these exams, you might see a screenshot that represents a blade on an Azure service, and you actually have to tick the checkboxes, configure things. So we're simulating small-scale things. I will tell you, and I'm wrapping up, related to those, you won't see all that many on the Azure exams. The reason is because the UI changes so often. So unless it's something, basic configuration of a VM that there's not much, even if it looks different, it's got the same boxes, same controls to configure. Those are fair game, but there's so many that change, you just don't do a lot of it. At this point, I have to wrap up. I'm here all day. If you have any other questions, I'll share what I can. There are a lot of things I can't share. But I'm just saying, changes in the wind. Take your exams, take them soon. Go to that learning site. Right now, there's a promotion. You can actually pay once, get 2 tries for the exam. Say again? Plus Measure Up tests. So Measure Up is owned by Pearson, Transcender, and self-test software are owned by Kaplan. Measure Up just happens to be partnered with Microsoft now, but and I haven't used self-test / Transcender in a couple of years now. I used to like them. I just haven't used them in a while because it's a better financial deal for me to use the Measure Up. With that, clap.